Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, watching the blue and green world of Haven's Rest spin slowly below them. The planet looked peaceful from space. Green fields stretched across the continents like a patchwork quilt. Rivers wound through valleys like silver ribbons. It was hard to believe that, in a few hours, this beautiful world might be nothing but ash and rock. The communication panel beeped 3 times. Jake turned to see his tactical officer commander, Lisa Park, reading the incoming message. Her face went pale as she read the words on her screen. She looked up at Jake with wide eyes. "Captain, we're getting an emergency transmission from Earth. It's marked Priority Alpha." "That means it's from the Colonial Defense Network headquarters." Jake felt his stomach drop. Priority Alpha messages only came when something terrible was happening. In his 15 years of service, he had only seen 3 such messages. The last one was when the mining colony at Kepler Station went dark forever. "Put it on the main screen, Lisa." The bridge fell silent as the message appeared. Every crew member stopped what they were doing to read. The words were simple, but they hit like a punch to the gut. "To all human colonies and ships. The Veilthran Empire has given us 30 days to surrender completely. If we refuse, they will destroy every human world and kill every human in space. This is not a joke. This is not a drill. 3 of our mining stations have already been destroyed as a warning. Prepare for immediate evacuation procedures. God help us all." Jake read the message twice. Then he read it again. The words didn't change. 30 days to surrender or die. He had heard of the Veilthran Empire, of course. Everyone had. They controlled over 200 star systems across the galaxy. Their ships were bigger than cities. Their weapons could turn entire planets into glass. "Captain?" Lisa's voice was quiet. "What are your orders?" Before Jake could answer, the ship's communication officer, Lieutenant Ben Harris, spoke up from his station. "Sir, I'm getting more messages from other ships. The merchant vessel Golden Star reports that Veilthran ships destroyed the mining platform at Ross Station. They say there were no survivors. 5,000 people, sir." Jake closed his eyes for a moment. 5,000 people, gone, just like that. And that was just a warning. "Get me Admiral Blake on Earth," Jake said. "Emergency channel." It took several minutes to establish the connection across the light years. When Admiral Susan Blake's face appeared on the screen, Jake could see the strain in her eyes. She looked like she had not slept in days. "Jake," she said, "I'm glad you got the message. How many people do you have on Haven's Rest?" "About 50,000 colonists, Admiral, plus my crew of 300. The planet has been our most successful farming colony. The people have built homes there. They have families." "I know," Blake said, "but we might have to abandon it. We're getting reports from all over human space. The Veilthran Empire isn't just asking us to surrender. They want us to become their slaves. They see humans as good fighters, and they want to use us in their armies." Jake felt anger rising in his chest. "We won't be slaves to anyone, Admiral." "I hope not," Blake said. "But their fleet is massive. We've counted over 3,000 ships, heading toward the core human worlds. Each one of their dreadnoughts is bigger than our largest battleship. And they have weapons we've never seen before." On Earth, President Ryan Carter was having the worst day of his life. He sat in the emergency meeting room deep under the capital city. Around the table sat his advisors, military leaders, and scientists. Everyone was talking at once. "We have to surrender," said General Patricia Webb. "We can't fight them. It would be suicide." "We can't surrender," argued Senator Mike Torres. "If we become their slaves, we're not really human anymore. We're just tools for their empire." Dr. Alex Murphy, the thin man with gray hair who ran the secret research programs, had been quiet during the whole meeting. Now he cleared his throat. "Mr. President," he said, "there might be another option." Everyone turned to look at him. "Carter." leaned forward. What kind of option, Doctor? For the past 5 years, my team has been working on something called Project Sunbreaker. It's theoretical, but the math works. We think we can build weapons that can make stars explode. The room went dead silent. General Webb stared at Murphy like he had grown a second head. You want to blow up suns? She asked. Not our suns, Murphy sighed. They're suns. If we can build these weapons and get close enough to Veilthran worlds, we can destroy their stars. When a star dies, it takes everything around it. Planets, ships, everything. Carter felt a chill run down his spine. How many people would die? Billions, Murphy said quietly. But they want to kill all of us anyway. At least this way, we fight back. Back on the New Horizon, Jake was talking to his senior officers in the conference room. The mood was grim. Everyone knew what they were facing. The Admiral wants us to evacuate Haven's Rest and join the Resistance fleet at Blackrock Station, Jake told them. It's hidden in an asteroid field near Centauri. What about the colonists? Asked Dr. Amy Stone, the ship's medical officer. Some of them have been on Haven's Rest for 20 years. It's their home. Their home won't matter if they're dead, said Engineering Chief Kate Rodriguez. The Veilthrans don't care about our homes or our families. They just want us to kneel. Lieutenant Harris, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke up. Captain, what if we don't run? What if we fight them here? With what? Lisa asked. We have one ship. They have thousands. Maybe one ship is enough, Harris sighed. If Dr. Murphy's weapon works. Jake looked around the table at his officers. These people had served with him for years. They trusted him to make the right choice. But what was the right choice when every option led to death? We're not going to kneel, Jake said finally. We're going to evacuate the colonists and then we're going to join the resistance. If we're going to die, we're going to die fighting. Outside the ship, Haven's Rest continued to turn peacefully in space, unaware that its days were numbered. In 30 days, everything would change. Humanity would either be slaves or they would be dead, but there was a third option that no one had considered yet. They could take the entire galaxy down with them. 20 days had passed since the ultimatum. Deep in space, hidden among the floating rocks of the Centauri asteroid field, Blackrock Station buzzed with activity. The secret base had been built inside a massive asteroid, its tunnels and chambers, carved from solid rock. Now it served as the gathering point for humanity's last hope. Captain Jake Morrison walked through the main corridor of the station. Everywhere he looked, he saw people working frantically. Engineers welded metal plates, soldiers cleaned weapons. Scientists hunched over computer screens covered with numbers and diagrams. Everyone knew they had only 10 days left. Jake entered the main briefing room where Admiral Blake was waiting. The room was packed with ship captains, commanders, and other officers. Some faces Jake recognized. Others were strangers who had traveled across the galaxy to be here. All of them had the same look in their eyes. The look of people who knew they were probably going to die. Gentlemen and ladies, Admiral Blake began. Let me introduce Commander Tony Williams. He just returned from a scouting mission into Veilthran space. Commander Williams stepped forward. He was a tall man with short black hair and a scar across his left cheek. His uniform was dirty and torn. He looked like he had been through hell. I took my ship, the Lightning Strike, deep into enemy territory, Williams said. What I found there is worse than we thought. The Veilthrans aren't just planning to make us surrender. They have detailed plans for what comes after. Williams activated a holographic display in the center of the room. Images appeared showing Veilthran documents and charts. They call it the Human Integration Protocol, Williams continued. They plan to take our children away from their parents at age 5. The children will be raised in Veilthran schools and trained to be soldiers. Adults will work in their factories and mines. Anyone who resists will be killed immediately. The room was silent. Jake felt sick to his stomach. He thought about the families on Haven's Rest, the children playing in the fields while their parents worked the farms. "There's more," Williams said. "I intercepted communications between their fleet commanders. They think humans are naturally good at fighting because we come from a dangerous planet. They want to use us as shock troops in their wars against other species. So surrender isn't really an option," said Captain Maria Santos from the destroyer Wolf Pack. "We'd just be trading quick death for slow death." Admiral Blake nodded grimly. "Which brings us to Dr. Murphy's project." Dr. Alex Murphy stood up from his seat near the back of the room. Behind him came a younger woman with the same gray eyes and determined expression. "This is my daughter, Commander Nicole Murphy," Dr. Murphy said. "She's been helping me with Project Sunbreaker. Nicole, show them what we've built." Nicole Murphy activated another holographic display. This one showed technical drawings of a device that looked like a torpedo, but much larger and more complex. "We call it a stellar manipulator," Nicole explained. "It's designed to fly directly into a star and to stabilize the nuclear reactions in the core. When that happens, the star goes supernova. Everything within several light hours gets destroyed." Engineer Kate Rodriguez, who had come with Jake from the New Horizon, raised her hand. "How close does a ship have to get to deploy this weapon?" "Very close," Nicole answered. "The ship carrying the manipulator has to enter the target star system and get within 1 million kilometers of the star. That puts you right in the middle of any defensive fleet." The room erupted in whispers and muttered conversations. Jake could hear fragments of what people were saying. "Suicide mission, one-way trip, no chance of survival." Admiral Blake raised her hand for silence. "We've identified 7 key star systems that control the Veilthrin Empire. Their homeworld, their main shipyards, their communication centers. If we can destroy all 7, their empire will collapse." "7 suicide missions," said Commander Williams quietly. "Yes," Blake admitted. 7 ships, 7 crews, 7 stars that will never shine again." Lieutenant Ben Harris, who had traveled with Jake from the New Horizon, stood up. "I'll take the first mission." Jake looked at his young communication officer with surprise. Harris was only 25 years old. He had his whole life ahead of him. "Ben, you don't have to." "Yes, I do, Captain," Harris interrupted. "We all knew this was coming. The moment we got that message, we all knew some of us weren't going home." Dr. Amy Stone, the medical officer who had also come from the New Horizon, grabbed Harris by the arm. "Ben, please. There has to be another way." Harris looked at Amy with sad eyes. Jake could see that the 2 young officers cared deeply for each other. Maybe they had even talked about getting married when the war was over. Now there might not be a war to survive. "Amy, if we don't do this, everyone dies," Harris said gently. "At least this way, some people live. Your patience. The children, the families on colonies like Haven's Rest." Admiral Blake looked around the room. "I won't order anyone to take these missions. They have to be volunteers. But I need 7 ships, and 7 crews willing to make the ultimate sacrifice." Hands began to rise around the room. First Harris, then Commander Williams, then Captain Santos. Within minutes, more than 20 officers had volunteered for the 7 suicide missions. Dr. Murphy stepped forward again. "There's something else you need to know. These weapons are experimental. We've never tested them on an actual star. The computer simulations say they'll work, but we can't be completely sure. So we might die for nothing," said Captain Pete Johnson from the cruiser Star Hammer. "It's possible," Murphy admitted, "but doing nothing guarantees we all die anyway." Jake looked at the faces around him. These were good people. Brave people. They had families and dreams and hopes for the future. Now they were talking about flying into the heart of enemy fleets to destroy entire star systems. "When do we launch?" Jake asked. The first mission leaves in 3 days, Blake answered. Lieutenant Harris will target the border system of Zarian Prime. It has a large Veilthrin fleet preparing to jump to Earth. If we can destroy that fleet, it might give us more time. Harris nodded. I'll take the Ghost Runner. She's fast and has good stealth systems. Amy Stone wiped tears from her eyes but didn't say anything. She knew arguing wouldn't change Harris's mind. Nicole Murphy began distributing data tablets to the volunteer crews. These contain everything we know about your target systems. Star types, planetary positions, fleet deployments. Study them carefully. You'll only get one chance. As the meeting broke up, Jake found himself walking beside Commander Williams. The scarred officer looked thoughtful. Commander, can I ask you something? Jake said, Sure, Captain. When you were in Veilthrin space, did you see anything that made you think they might change their minds? Any sign that they might be willing to negotiate? Williams stopped walking and turned to face Jake. His expression was hard as stone. Captain, I watched them destroy a peaceful trading station just because the aliens there refused to pay higher taxes. 300,000 beings died in 30 seconds. These aren't people you can negotiate with. They only understand strength. Jake nodded slowly. Then we give them strength. Yes, Williams agreed. Even if it kills us all. Above them, hidden in the asteroid field, ships from across human space continued to arrive. Most would serve as escorts and distractions. But 7 would carry weapons that could kill stars themselves. The countdown to humanity's greatest gamble had begun. Lieutenant Ben Harris sat alone in the cockpit of the Ghost Runner, watching the stars through the front window. In 6 hours, the 30-day deadline would be over. The Veilthrin Empire expected humanity to surrender completely. Instead, Ben was about to do something no one in the galaxy had ever done before. He was going to kill a star. The Ghost Runner was a small ship, built for speed and stealth. Its black hull could bend light around it, making it nearly invisible to enemy sensors. Ben had chosen it carefully. He needed to get close to the Zarian system without being detected. Once he deployed the stellar manipulator, it wouldn't matter if they saw him. He would already be dead. Behind him in the cargo bay, the weapon waited. It looked simple enough. A metal cylinder about the size of a coffin, covered with blinking lights and cooling vents. Dr. Murphy had explained how it worked, but Ben didn't really understand all the science. All he knew was that when it reached the star's core, Zarian would explode like the biggest bomb ever made. Ghost Runner, this is Blackrock Control, came Admiral Blake's voice over the radio. You are cleared for departure. Good luck, Lieutenant. Thank you, Admiral, Ben replied. He started the engines and felt the ship vibrate slightly. Tell Amy I said goodbye. Ben had already said goodbye to Dr. Amy Stone in person, but it hadn't been enough. How do you say goodbye to someone you love when you know you'll never see them again? He had tried to memorize her face, the sound of her voice, the way she smiled when she was happy. Now those memories would have to last him for the next few hours. The Ghost Runner slipped away from Blackrock Station and jumped into hyperspace. The trip to Zarian would take 4 hours. Ben tried to sleep during the journey, but his mind wouldn't stop racing. He thought about his childhood on Mars, where his parents still lived. He thought about joining the Colonial Navy and meeting Captain Morrison. He thought about Amy and the life they might have had together when the ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zarian system. Ben's hands were steady on the controls. Fear was a luxury he couldn't afford now. The Zarian system was impressive and terrifying. The star burned bright yellow at the center, surrounded by 6 planets. The third planet, Zarian Prime, was covered with the geometric patterns of Veilthrin cities. But what made Ben's breath catch were the ships. Hundreds of them filled the space around Zarian Prime, massive dreadnoughts that looked like floating mountains. Smaller destroyers and cruisers swarmed around them like insects. Ben had never seen so many warships in one place. According to his instruments, there were over 400 Veilthrin vessels in the system. All those ships, Ben whispered to himself, all those people. For a moment, doubt crept into his mind. The Veilthrins had families too, children, parents, people who just wanted to live their lives in peace. When Zarian exploded, all of them would die, but then Ben remembered the images Commander Williams had shown them. Human children being taken from their parents, families working as slaves in alien mines. The 3 mining stations that had already been destroyed as warnings. They made their choice, Ben said out loud. Now I make mine. The Ghost Runner's stealth systems were working perfectly. Ben flew deeper into the system, past the outer planets, past the defensive stations, past the huge fleets. His heart pounded as enemy ships passed close enough to touch, but none of them detected his presence. Meanwhile, back at Blackrock Station, the final preparations were being made. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the command center with Admiral Blake, watching the tactical display. Red dots showed Veilthrin fleets moving toward human colonies. Blue dots showed the remaining human ships, pitifully few compared to the enemy numbers. The main Veilthrin invasion fleet is moving toward Earth, reported Commander Lisa Park. They'll be there in 18 hours. What about our other suicide missions? Blake asked. Commander Nicole Murphy checked her instruments. The second team is ready to launch. Commander Williams will target the Thrakmer system in 12 hours, the industrial center where they build their biggest ships. Jake watched the display and felt the weight of command pressing down on him. Every decision he made now would affect the survival of the human race. If Harris failed, if the stellar manipulator didn't work, then everything was lost. Signal from the Ghost Runner, Park announced suddenly. Harris has reached Zarian. He's beginning his final approach. In the Zarian system, Ben guided his ship toward the star itself. The heat was incredible, even with the ship's shields at maximum power. Warning lights flashed on his control panel as the temperature inside the cockpit began to rise. Sweat dripped down his face, but he kept flying. The Veilthrin fleets were behind him now. If any of them detected him, they would try to stop him, but it was too late. The Ghost Runner was already committed to its final course. Deployment range in 30 seconds, Ben announced over the radio, knowing his friends at Blackrock were listening. Amy, if you can hear this, I love you. Tell my parents I died for something that mattered. Ben armed the stellar manipulator and prepared to release it. The device would fly into the star's core while his ship tried to escape. He wouldn't make it far, but maybe far enough to see his weapon work. Deployment in 10 seconds. Ben counted down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Weapon away. The stellar manipulator shot away from the Ghost Runner like a bullet, its small engines carrying it directly toward the heart of Zarian. Ben immediately turned his ship around and accelerated as fast as the engines would go. Behind him, alarms were starting to sound on Veilthrin ships as they finally detected the human vessel. But it was too late to stop what was coming. The manipulator reached the star's surface and burrowed deep into the nuclear fires. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the star flickered. On Zarian Prime, people looked up at their sun and saw something impossible. The yellow light was changing, becoming brighter and more blue. Emergency sirens began to wail across the planet as scientists realized what was happening. The star is destabilizing. Ben heard someone shouting over the Veilthrin communication channels. All ships evacuate immediately. The sun is going to explode, but there wasn't time. The stellar manipulator had done its work perfectly. The nuclear reactions inside Zarian were spiraling out of control. The star was about to become a supernova. Ben was still trying to escape when the star exploded. The Ghost Runner was vaporized instantly, along with Ben Harris, the young man who had volunteered to die so that others might live. The explosion expanded outward at incredible speed, consuming the planets, the space stations, and all 400 Veilthrin warships. In less than an hour, the entire Zarian system was gone. Where a star and 6 planets had existed for billions of years, there was now only an expanding cloud of superheated gas and debris. At Blackrock Station, the long-range sensors detected the explosion. The command center fell silent as everyone realized what they had just witnessed. They had actually done it. They had killed a star. "My God," whispered Admiral Blake. It worked. Captain Morrison felt sick and proud at the same time. Ben Harris was dead, along with millions of Veilthrins. But the weapon worked. Humanity had a chance. "Prepare the second mission," Blake ordered. "Commander Williams launches in 6 hours." Across the galaxy, the Veilthrin Empire reeled in shock. Never in their 1,000-year history had anyone dared to destroy an entire star system. The Emperor himself, Zircon the Conqueror, sat on his throne and stared at the reports in disbelief. "They killed Zarian," he said slowly. "The humans killed an entire star." His advisors stood around him in stunned silence. Finally, one of them spoke. "Great Emperor, perhaps we should reconsider our demands. If they can destroy stars—" "No," Zircon interrupted, his voice filled with rage. "They want to fight like monsters? Then we will show them what real monsters can do. Send every ship we have toward their homeworld. If they want to burn stars, we'll burn their entire species." The war had begun in earnest. Humanity had fired the first shot, and it had been heard across the galaxy. Now there could be no surrender, no compromise, no mercy. The stars themselves had become weapons, and nothing would ever be the same. 3 more stars had died in the past week. Commander Tony Williams had successfully destroyed Thrakmer, taking the Empire's largest shipyard with him. Captain Maria Santos eliminated the military fortress at Cordon, where the Veilthrins trained their elite soldiers. Lieutenant Colonel Sam Brooks had flown his ship into the communication hub at Zeftos, cutting off command signals to half the galaxy. Each success came with a terrible price. 4 of humanity's best officers were dead. 4 entire star systems had been wiped from existence. And still the war continued. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, watching the tactical display with growing worry. The surviving human fleet had grown smaller with each mission. Many ships had been destroyed while providing cover for the suicide runs. Others had been lost in desperate battles across human space. "Captain," Commander Lisa Park called from her station, "we're getting reports from Earth. The Veilthrin main fleet has reached the outer system. They'll be at Earth in 6 hours." Jake felt his stomach tighten. Earth, the birthplace of humanity. 3 billion people lived there, including his own sister and her children. If the Veilthrins reached Earth before the remaining suicide missions could be completed, it would all be over. "How many ships are we talking about?" Jake asked. "Over 1,000, Park replied grimly. "It's the largest fleet movement in galactic history. Emperor Zircon is leading it personally." In the engineering section of Blackrock Station, Kate Rodriguez worked frantically over a collection of metal parts and electronic components. Sweat dripped from her forehead as she connected cables and calibrated sensors. Next to her, Dr. Nicole Murphy checked calculations on a portable computer. "Are you sure this will work?" Kate asked, not looking up from her work. "The math says yes," Nicole replied. "If we combine the last 2 stellar manipulators into one device, it should be powerful. Enough to destroy even a system as large as Veilthros Prime." Kate paused in her work. Veilthros Prime was the capital of the Empire, the homeworld where Emperor Zircon had been born. It was also home to 50 billion civilians who had never fired a shot at any human. "Nicole," Kate said quietly, "that's 50 billion people, including children." Nicole's hand stopped moving over her computer keyboard. "I know. But if we don't stop the Empire here, They'll kill every human in the galaxy. Sometimes there are no good choices. Kate nodded and went back to work, but the weight of what they were building pressed down on her like a physical thing. This wasn't just a weapon anymore. It was a device that could commit genocide on a scale never seen before. Admiral Blake entered the engineering section, followed by several other officers. Her face was grim. "How long until the combined weapon is ready?" she asked. 2 hours, Kate answered. "But Admiral, we need to talk about the target." "Valethros Prime has civilians. I know what it has," Blake interrupted. "But it also has the Emperor's personal fleet. Over 200 of their most advanced ships. If we can destroy them along with the Star, it might end the war." Captain Pete Johnson, who had volunteered for the final mission, stepped forward. "Admiral, I've been thinking about this. My ship, the Stellar Forge, can carry the combined weapon. But I want to know something. Do we have to target the Star itself? Could we aim for just the military installations?" Dr. Nicole Murphy shook her head. "If you don't hit the Star directly, the weapon won't have enough power to destroy the entire fleet. Some ships will escape, and they'll rebuild the Empire somewhere else." "But if I do hit the Star," Johnson said, 50 billion people die, including civilians who never chose this war." The room fell silent. Everyone knew what Johnson was asking. Was winning the war worth becoming the same kind of monsters they were fighting against? Meanwhile, in space near Earth, the largest battle in human history was beginning. Admiral Susan Blake's remaining ships, less than 200 vessels, faced over 1,000 Valethran dreadnoughts. The human ships were faster and more maneuverable, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. Commander Danny White flew his fighter through a storm of enemy fire, trying to reach the Valethran flagship. Behind him, Lieutenant Kelly Adams and her squadron fought desperately to keep the enemy fighters off his back. "This is hopeless," Adams said over the radio. "There are too many of them." "Keep fighting," White replied. "Every minute we hold them. Here's another minute for the final mission to reach Valethros Prime." On the surface of Earth, people looked up at the sky and saw flashes of light as ships exploded in the darkness. Children pressed their faces against windows while their parents tried to explain what was happening. In the cities, emergency sirens wailed continuously. Back at Black Rock Station, Captain Morrison made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "I'm taking the final mission," he announced. Admiral Blake looked surprised. "Jake, you don't have to." "Captain Johnson already volunteered. Johnson has a family," Morrison replied. 3 kids and a wife on New Geneva. I'm just a career officer, with no one waiting for me at home." That wasn't entirely true. Morrison had friends who cared about him. His crew on the New Horizon looked up to him like a father. But he was the senior captain present, and he felt responsible for the choices that had led them to this point. "Captain," Kate Rodriguez said as she finished installing the combined weapon on the Stellar Forge, "this device is different from the others. It's more powerful, but it's also more unstable. You'll have to get very close to the target star." "Closer than anyone has tried before," Morrison nodded. "How close?" "Within 500,000 kilometers. Any farther and the weapon won't penetrate deep enough into the star's core." Morrison did the math in his head. 500,000 kilometers meant flying directly through the heart of the enemy fleet. The Stellar Forge would be destroyed long before it reached the target. "There might be a way," Nicole Murphy said suddenly. "If we modify the ship's engines to overload at exactly the right moment, it could give you a burst of speed. Enough to punch through their defensive lines. And then?" Morrison asked. "Then the engines explode and you're flying a dead ship toward a star," Nicole admitted. "But you might survive long enough to deploy the weapon." Morrison looked around at the faces of his colleagues. These people had become his family over the years of service together. Now he was about to leave them forever. "Do it," he said. "Modify the engines." As the Stellar Forge was prepared for its final mission, reports continued to come in from the battle at Earth. The human fleet was being slowly destroyed. Ships that Morrison had served on, friends he had known for decades, were disappearing one by one from the tactical display. "Admiral Blake's flagship is heavily damaged," reported the communications officer. "She's requesting all available ships to fall back to the moon's orbit." Morrison knew what that meant. The human fleet was retreating to make their final stand at humanity's birth world. If the Stellar Forge failed in its mission, Earth would fall within hours. "Captain," Kate said as she sealed the last access panel on the modified engines, "the ship is ready. But I have to warn you again. This weapon is powerful enough to destroy everything in the Veilthro system. The star, the planets, the 50 billion people living there. Are you prepared for that?" Morrison looked at the weapon that would either save humanity or make him the greatest mass murderer in galactic history. The choice was simple and terrible. Kill 50 billion innocent people, or watch the human race become extinct. "I'm prepared," he said, though he wasn't sure he meant it. The Stellar Forge launched from Blackrock Station and jumped into hyperspace, carrying Captain Jake Morrison toward a choice that would define the future of the galaxy. Behind him, the last human ships fought desperately to buy him time. The final star was about to die, and with it, either humanity's enemies or humanity's soul. Captain Jake Morrison's hands gripped the controls of the Stellar Forge as the ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Veilthro system. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. The Veilthran homeworld hung in space like a jewel, covered in cities that sparkled with billions of lights. 3 moons orbited the planet, each one turned into a massive space station. And everywhere, as far as his sensors could detect, were ships. The Emperor's personal fleet surrounded Veilthros Prime like a steel wall. Massive dreadnoughts floated in perfect formation, their weapons pointed outward to protect their sacred homeworld. Morrison counted over 300 vessels, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. But it was the planet itself that made Morrison hesitate. Through his ship's telescopes, he could see the surface clearly. Cities stretched across continents like glowing webs. Parks and forests broke up the urban areas with patches of green. Weather satellites showed peaceful cloud formations moving across blue oceans. 50 billion people, Morrison whispered to himself, including children who've never even heard of humans. His radio crackled to life. It was Admiral Blake, broadcasting from the battle at Earth. "Morrison, the situation here is critical. We've lost half our ships. The Veilthrans are beginning their final assault on Earth. You're our only hope." Morrison looked at the combined stellar manipulator in his cargo bay. The weapon that could end the war, but only if he was willing to become history's greatest monster. "Admiral," Morrison said slowly, "what if there was another way? What if I could target just the military installations instead of the star?" "Jake, we've been through this. Dr. Murphy said the weapon needs the full power of a stellar explosion to destroy the entire fleet. If any ships escape, they'll rebuild the Empire." Morrison stared at the beautiful planet below. Somewhere down there, alien children were playing in parks while their parents worked in offices and factories. They didn't know that a human ship was preparing to kill their son. "Admiral, I'm going to try something different." Before Blake could respond, Morrison cut the communication link. He couldn't let anyone else bear responsibility for what he was about to do. Morrison activated the ship's engines and began flying toward the heart of the Veilthran fleet. Immediately, alarms started sounding on enemy ships. Hundreds of weapons turned toward the small human vessel. "Unknown ship," came a voice over the radio in accented but clear English. "You are in restricted space. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." Morrison didn't answer. Instead, he pushed the engines to maximum power. Kate Rodriguez's modifications worked perfectly. The Stellar Forge shot forward like a bullet, moving faster than any ship its size should be able to travel. Velthran weapons opened fire. Beams of energy and streams of projectiles filled the space around Morrison's ship. Most missed, but some found their target. The Stellar Forge's hull began to glow red-hot as energy weapons struck it again and again. "Come on," Morrison urged his ship. Just a little farther. Behind him, the modified engines were beginning to overload exactly as planned. Warning lights flashed across his control panel. The ship was shaking itself apart, but it was still flying. Morrison broke through the outer defensive line and dove toward the planet. The Velthran flagship, a massive vessel twice the size of any human battleship, moved to intercept him. Morrison could see its main gun charging, preparing to vaporize his ship with one shot. Then the Stellar Forge's engines exploded. The blast threw Morrison forward against his control panel. Blood ran down his face from a cut on his forehead. The ship's systems went dead. But the explosion had also given him one final burst of speed, carrying him past the flagship and into the inner system. Now Morrison faced his choice. The star Velthros burned bright and yellow ahead of him, just like Earth's sun. If he fired the stellar manipulator into its core, the resulting supernova would kill every living thing in the system. 50 billion civilians would die, but so would Emperor Zircon and his entire fleet. Or he could split the weapon's power, targeting only the military installations. It would save the civilians, but some enemy ships might escape to rebuild the empire somewhere else. Morrison thought about Ben Harris, who had died destroying Zarian. He thought about Commander Williams and Captain Santos, and all the others who had sacrificed themselves. They had died believing they were saving humanity. What would they want him to do? He thought about the children on Earth, looking up at the Pleum sky and wondering if they would live to see another day. Morrison made his choice. He programmed the stellar manipulator to split its power. Half would target the Emperor's flagship and the military stations around the moons. The other half would hit the star, but not deeply enough to cause a full supernova. The star would flicker and dim, but it wouldn't explode. "I'm sorry, Morrison," sighed, speaking to Ben Harris and all the others who had died. "I can't become a monster, even to save us all." Morrison launched the weapon and watched it streak toward its targets. The first part of the device hit the Emperor's flagship, just as Zircon himself was preparing to give the order to finish off Earth. The massive ship exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the entire system. The second part of the weapon struck the star's surface and burrowed toward the core. For a moment, Velthros flickered like a candle in the wind. Then it stabilized, damaged but still burning. The military installations around the moons were destroyed. Over 100 Velthran warships died in the explosions. But the planet below remained safe, its billions of inhabitants saved by Morrison's choice. The Stellar Forge, its engines dead and its hull cracked, drifted powerless through space. Morrison expected to die within minutes, either from his injuries or from the remaining Velthran ships, but something unexpected happened. The enemy ships didn't fire on him. Instead, a message came over his radio. It was from Admiral Kethver, the second in command of the Velthran fleet. "Human captain," the alien voice said. "Emperor Zircon is dead. You could have destroyed our entire world, but you chose to spare our civilians. I am prepared to discuss terms for ending this war." Morrison couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You want to surrender?" "Not surrender," Kethver replied. "But perhaps we can find a way to stop the killing. Your species has shown us something we did not expect. You have power to destroy stars, but you also have mercy. That is worthy of respect." Over the following days, as Morrison recovered in the Velthran medical bay, negotiations began. The Empire was in chaos. Many of the member species had already rebelled when they learned that humans could destroy entire star systems. Others had fled to distant galaxies to escape the war. Without Emperor Zircon's iron fist holding it together, the Veilthrin Empire collapsed. Hundreds of worlds declared independence. The age of galactic conquest was over. Morrison eventually returned to Earth, where he found a changed world. The planet had survived the final battle, but barely. Cities lay in ruins. Millions of people had died defending their home, but humanity had survived, and more importantly, they had kept their souls. They had wielded the power of stars themselves, but they had not let that power corrupt them completely. Years later, Morrison stood in a park on New Geneva, watching human and alien children play together under an artificial sun. Dr. Murphy's team had learned to create new stars to replace the ones destroyed in the war. The galaxy was slowly healing. A young girl, part human and part Veilthrin, ran up to Morrison and asked him to tell her about the war. Morrison looked down at her. Mixed heritage, a symbol of the peace that had followed the violence. It was a time when good people had to make terrible choices, Morrison said simply. But in the end, we chose to be better than our enemies. That's what made us human. The girl nodded solemnly and ran back to her friends. Morrison watched them play under the light of a star that would burn for billions of years, a reminder that even from the ashes of war, new hope could grow. Humanity had turned stars to ashes, but from those ashes, they had built a better galaxy for everyone.